Hi, my name is David, and you are listening to Change Your Mind podcast, episode 15.
One, two, three, four.
My mission is to redefine personal development, make it much more accessible for everyone, and convince as many people as possible that change is possible, no matter what is your current situation. The podcast that you are listening to is one of the elements of this mission realization, along with the blog, to which the link you can find in the description of this and every episode. In this series, I'm interviewing inspirational people, and also I'm sharing my experience and thoughts, which make you think and encourage you to take an action. My today's guest is Jeremy Randall. He is working as a Scrum Master in tech company in France, and he is a promoter of the usage of Scrum and Agile in everyday life. Jeremy released the book Scrumify Your Life and created Scrumify Workbook. He also offers services as a personal Scrum Master to help people use Scrum to get big things done. We are talking about how to become a Scrum Master without the professional experience. What does it mean to use Scrum in everyday life? What is the biggest challenge in the Agile and Scrum industry right now? And what is Jeremy's approach to the personal development? If you like this conversation, I'd like to ask you to share it with your friends. And right now, let's move on into the conversation.
3, 2, 1, yeah!
Thanks, Jeremy, for Jeremy.
Yeah,
Is
Jeremy.
that pronounced? Yeah, okay. Yeah, because I sometimes I have a problem with the pronunciation, so I prefer to ask people.
Yeah,
So
and you pronounce your
Jeremy.
name David, right? Mm,
Yeah, in Polish language, David, or in English, is kind only David,
yeah.
like international. Yeah.
I mean, which do you prefer for the purposes of?
Whatever you prefer,
Well,
it can be David.
no, I actually prefer David because I live in France and all the
Okay.
Davids here are Davids anyway.
So thanks for joining this conversation. Actually, this is another example how, I mean, maybe not how, but what kind of interesting people I can meet in the internet and talk to about many different topics. Because actually, I do not recall the moment that we meet on LinkedIn, but probably it was the time when I started my journey as a Scrum Master, and I just show your content on LinkedIn about that. But it also will be, topic to talk about your story. So,
Sure.
yeah, first of all, I would like to ask you for the introduction because this is what I'm doing basically at the beginning of every single conversation.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me on. My name's Jeremy Randall, and I'm an American living in France, and I work as a Scrum Master. I'm pretty sure you're right. You probably found me. I think that you and I started talking a lot on LinkedIn about Scrum, actually around the same time. I've been pretty active since about May.
Mhm. So, yeah, the first question was about why you really decided to become a Scrum Master. Because from this, what I read from your profile, you've been engineer for quite long time, and I'm just curious about why you made that decision to become soft skill person instead of the technical guy.
Sure. So actually, I've only been an engineer for about 5 years professionally. And before that, I had a lot of like customer facing roles. I worked in tech support for a while. I actually had a fairly long career working in casinos dealing card games. So I've always been sort of the person to talk to people, help them understand the rules of the game, and figure out how to go forward. Um, in my second professional engineering job, when I joined the team, they actually were using Scrum, and it was the first time I had ever been exposed to Scrum. But unfortunately, they didn't have a budget to have a Scrum Master on their team. So it was a product owner and a bunch of developers and QAs. But without the Scrum Master, they were really struggling to understand how it was supposed to help them and they just felt like the weight of the overhead of all the meetings and things like that. So just before I joined, the team had decided that they needed a Scrum Master, but since they couldn't bring somebody in for that, each of the developers would just take a turn for a month at a time, filling the Scrum Master accountability. I took the first 3 months to get through my trial period. And as soon as I was out, I actually raised my hand and offered to take my month as Scrum Master next, because in the 3 months that I'd been there as an engineer, I saw a lot of room for process improvements and things like that. Now, most of the people took a really light touch, mostly just as a meeting facilitator. But when I came on board, I immediately asked for a bunch of changes. I rearranged the schedule. I did a short presentation on how to estimate in story points, because the team had been struggling with that really badly for the 3 months I'd already been there. And in our first retro that I facilitated, the team asked that we would just stop the rotation of all the developers through the Scrum Master role and keep me on for the Scrum Master job permanently. So it's less that I chose it, more that it chose me.
I think that your story is the confirmation of the, maybe not the myth, but the some kind of the statement that the Scrum Master is derived from the team. That one developer one day raised the hand, I would like to be a Scrum Master, and because the company or company decided to implement the Scrum, and they are looking for someone internally, so this is why engineers become a Scrum Master, and really interesting about that.
I hear that a lot.
Yeah, I heard that also, but yeah, it's good to see that engineers would like to take some soft skills role. But I'm also invited you to our conversation because this is my point of view right now, that if someone asks me about the how to become a Scrum Master, I'm saying that start to use Scrum Master in your life. Of course, we'll go into the topic later, but you are kind of the biggest, if in my opinion, the promoter of this using the Scrum in life. But before that, I think that you moved to the different country. Maybe you would like to explain that process, because it's really interesting also from the process point of view. And is that decision was also because of your new role or something different?
No, so actually, I became a Scrum Master about a year and a half after I moved to France. So I'm American, and I actually lived in the US for my entire life until just a little over 3 years ago. And I had not been exposed to Scrum or Agile in any way. I'd only worked for waterfall companies or things that were not in development at all. But when I was in my mid 30s, I took my first trip to Europe, and I was super inspired to be in a place that had a much longer, deeper history and culture than where I was living. And I remember a moment when I'm sitting on a terrace in I think Split, Croatia, and my girlfriend at the time and I are sitting there eating lunch, and I say, "We have to move." And I reach out and I touch the stone wall next to me. I say, "Because this wall has more history than my entire country," which it was like this. You don't get perspective on your own life until you get outside of it. Of course, we didn't move. that was many years ago. But once that girlfriend and I got married, and then we had a daughter, it really motivated me to think about starting to make changes toward that goal. We wanted our daughter to grow up with a deeper culture. We really liked the idea of her being bilingual. We felt like it would open a lot of doors for her. So we came up with a fuzzy idea of how we could move to Europe. And I wanted to go back to Croatia because I'd fallen in love with it. But The whole idea of moving to Europe from the US is it's complex work, right? Because you know where you're starting and you have a rough idea of where you want to go, but you don't know all the steps in between. What I did know is that I would need work that I could do from anywhere, and that we would eventually have to figure out where we wanted to go and the visa process and how you actually get there. So we had a rough idea, but nothing in between was clear. So at the time, I didn't know that the idea of just moving forward with the little bit that you know and letting things become clear as you make progress was agility. But once I became a Scrum Master years later, now that I'm in France, which is where we wound up moving to, um, I have seen all these parallels between Scrum and Kanban and Agile in general with the way that I approach that problem, and it's inspired me to start thinking about how we can use Scrum more and more in our lives to tackle big problems that, for most of my life, something like that would just seem so big and fuzzy and hard to figure out that I'd abandon it before I got started.
And this is quite interesting that you did it. I don't know how to pronounce this. Not consciously, but without knowing that you are doing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually great. And this is why I'm speaking about it, that if someone would like to become a Scrum Master, there is a multiple ways that you can use Scrum or Agile at all to your personal life or to your personal project. But connected question with that is about the people who would like to become a Scrum Master, because I believe that many of them are reaching out to you for piece of advices, for recommendation and so on. So if you are able, I mean, I know that this is very broad topic right now, but what would you recommend for the people who would like to become a Scrum Master?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good point. I talk a lot about using Scrum in your personal life online, and I have a lot of people who talk to me about wanting to become Scrum Masters, and there's a real convergence there because I think that you really have to love and appreciate agility to be a good Scrum Master. And I mean, the market is almost saturated with people that are interested in Scrum Master jobs right now, but not all of them are particularly well suited to it. I think it takes a certain interest in the subject matter and also sort of obviously a mindset and a temperament to be able to be a good Scrum Master. So I usually suggest to people that a good way to figure out if this is a job that you would want to do is to start using Scrum in your own life. Typically, I suggest doing two different things. One is to take something really simple in your life with a team so that you can be the Scrum Master and get to know the difference between the product owner and the developers and the Scrum Master. In my family, and in most cases, what I recommend is just like Scrumifying your chores. So it's nothing where there's complex work. You know all the things that have to do. You don't have to write user stories or anything like that, just tasks. But actually doing the planning, the daily check-ins, and having a review and a retrospective at the end of the week will help you start to understand how the structure of Scrum works. Assigning one person in your family to be the product owner who determines what's really valuable. That
It's of course your wife.
Yes.
Come on.
Yes. Well, no, so it doesn't have to be, but actually, there's a really nice side benefit to this. Yes, in my family, my wife is the product owner, and that's actually because she's kind of the worrier in the family, right? So she will have things on her mind and just need them to get done right away, so that they're not taking up like mental space. And once we started using Scrum and allowing her to be the product owner, we just use a Trello board to hold our backlog of all the items. She's in charge of looking at that list, knowing that everything that she's worried about getting done eventually is on the list, and she will decide in which sprint that will be the top priority. She never has to worry that something is just going to get forgotten, right? And I don't have to worry about doing something 6 months in advance just so she's not stressed that we'll someday forget to do it. So that's a really nice split for the two of us. So I take care of Scrum Master duties. She takes care of product owner style prioritization. And then she and I and our 4-year-old are all developers at the same time, and we get the work done.
Did you try to exchange the roles? I mean, for as an experiment, that you will become a product owner for few sprints and she will be the Scrum Master.
So I wouldn't say that we've tried switching them, but we do treat them a little more like accountabilities than roles, which is, I don't know, probably worth mentioning because it's a nice change in the most recent version of the Scrum Guide, where I don't just expect her as the product owner to know everything there is to know about the prioritization. I also come to our sprint planning on Monday mornings with an idea about what I think is important, and so I'm still contributing to the discussion. And sometimes I can sneak the things that I need to get done into the list.
And you mentioned in your one of your thoughts is about that the market of the Scrum Master is really saturated.
Yeah.
And it reminds me about one meme which is talking about what is the motivation of people to become a Scrum Master, and there is a pie chart, and yeah, there is the 90% answers are about that this is the IT industry, so they are paying well, and 1% because I'm interested in the developing of the developing of the product incrementally. Yeah. If it's that true, it depends, of course, as with everything with IT. But yeah, I would like to ask about, from your point of view, what is the current biggest challenge in the Scrum industry and overall Agile industry? Let's call it in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of challenges in the Agile, workspace. But to speak to what you were just talking about with the market saturation, it's a real big deal because there are a ton of people. Especially, I mostly talk to Americans because I'm American, and they, it's easier. But Americans especially seem super burned out in their work, and they look towards the Scrum Master position because it pays well and doesn't require you to already know how to code. But it's a little bit, I don't know, the industry problem is that there's sort of this certification mill that presents Scrum Master as a job you can get after a 2-day training course. And that's really not true because the 2-day training just, essentially make sure that you've read the Scrum Guide and have a very, very basic understanding of it, but it doesn't teach you anything about actually doing the job. I think that Scrum really needs an overhaul in terms of having a real path to the Scrum Master job that doesn't have to go through being a developer. In my opinion, on my team where I became the Scrum Master, I was definitely the best suited person for it because I was late to join the industry as an engineer, and most of the people on my team had been engineers for years, decades even. So they were very much in an engineering mindset, which is often, especially if you've worked in places that haven't used Scrum before, it's very much stare at your screen and work on a problem on your own and then deliver, right? But the skill set for being a Scrum Master is super, super different from that. It's a lot of interpersonal skills, being able to talk to people, being able to knowledge share in a really effective way, not minding that you teach the same thing over and over again. I don't know, it's just so much more people focused than the typical skill set of a very good developer, which is very like code focused. So I would really like to see ways to get more Scrum Masters into the industry without having to go through being on a Scrum team already. I think that probably the best way there is through some new training programs for new Scrum Masters that show them what it's like to be on a Scrum team, but don't force them to pick up technical skills to get there. I think really the biggest deal, though, is getting the buy-in from employers who are going to hire for these jobs, because most of them at this point seem to they only want Scrum Masters that have 2 to 5 years of experience, even for what they call an entry-level Scrum Master job. And if they really hold to that, then we're only going to have a diminishing number of Scrum Masters on the market.
I think about the certification, it's not a problem with the certification itself, because in my opinion is a kind of the proof that you read this Scrum guide, you understand it, and you have this basic knowledge. But for me, and also it was the problem for me at the beginning of my journey as a Scrum Master, that okay, I read there that there are certain things that you should follow, but the reality is kind of the different, because you need to work with the people. So, and this is why it's not that easy as many people think. I see the problem about giving opportunities by the companies for the entry level people, but I cannot agree that people who, for example, work as a teachers, because I believe that you told me last time this example that many teachers would like to become a Scrum Master. I think that there are not entry-level people because they have soft skills, right?
Exactly. It's that we're not, the industry as a whole don't seem to be checking for the skills that are most relevant to the job, but rather checking to see if they've worked on a Scrum team before, which is obviously relevant, but it's not a skill set check. It's just a previous experience check.
And also to this point, I don't understand, connecting the number of years of experience with the knowledge. Because, okay, I understand that, if you work for some time, you gain more experience. Based on that, you have more knowledge about the teams, how to tackle the problems and so on. But yeah, my question to you might be more about, how to tackle with that situation that company expect X number of years of experience, but people on the entry level don't have that, and how to present ourselves to the potential employer.
Yeah, that's a really difficult one, and still something that we're working on figuring out. I think that on one side of it, employers don't necessarily know how to properly check for a Scrum Master that knows what they're doing. So they use an amount of experience as a proxy because they're not sure what they're looking for. This probably comes from lumping Scrum Masters into engineering departments, which are just really very different, and not necessarily having an agile department at the company that could appropriately determine, someone's skill level. And then on the other side, it's that people don't really know how to properly talk about their own skill sets or the experience they have outside of work as a Scrum Master that's applicable so that the employers will understand it.
And this is also connected with my understanding and my belief about the being a Scrum Master without the, let's call it as a professional experience, because many skills, let's call it as a skills that Scrum Master should have, you can learn on the completely different jobs. And this is one of my findings that, for example, if you say that, I know, active listening is not the skill that is connected to the Scrum Master, right? Is the widely used skill in many different jobs, so you can learn it in many different places. And also, I read on your profile also the term about being a personal Scrum Master, which is kind of new for me. I heard about the Scrum Manager one time, but personal Scrum Master, I familiarize this with something that I know. As you have, I know, personal assistant, for example, right? So maybe someone can hire personal Scrum Master. What does it mean?
Yeah. So actually, that's a term that somebody I'm working with gave to me. They said they actually proposed to me that I work for them as their personal Scrum Master because they wanted to use Scrum or this personal agility in their own lives in order to build up a business. It was something that they understood the value of Scrum and Agile, but felt like the overhead of holding all three roles on a Scrum team at the same time was, overwhelming. So they asked me to essentially facilitate a lot of the Scrum events for them and act as a proxy stakeholder and things like that to help them use Scrum in their own life to achieve their goals. It's been really cool. And I'm enjoying working with them. And now I actually have more than one person that I'm working with in this way. I think it's super useful too, especially if you haven't used Scrum before professionally, or at least not extensively. If you weren't a Scrum Master yourself, then you've probably never been expected to fully wrap your head around the entire framework. And so having a Scrum Master who can sort of hold your hand through the process to make sure you're getting the most out of it can be really useful.
So it might be the job for the future. I mean that people will hire the Scrum Master for their personal purposes. It's quite
I
yeah.
hope so. That would be great. You know, one of my personal struggles in being a Scrum Master is that I love the work I do and I love working with teams. I love seeing the people on the teams figure out new ways to be more effective. They have increased pride in their work and the products they're making. And you can even see them growing like as people. It's super cool, really fulfilling. But in the end, the vast majority of companies that have a budget for you to come work as a Scrum Master are, there are things like big banks or oil companies where you don't feel like exactly like their mission aligns with your own personal mission. And so it's a little bit of, I really like this team. I like working with them. I like helping them. It's a shame that I'm making this thing that doesn't make the world better in the way that I want to make it better. So the idea of working just with individuals to help them achieve their personal goals sounds really, really appealing. I would love to
Because you
see
see
that
the
grow.
results, right? I mean, you see the results, and at the same time, you see the the impact on that person. It's quite interesting about.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
maybe I will ask here additional question because um,
Sure.
I think that many companies are taking Scrum as a something that they need to have because for many reasons. It's of course
Hmm.
depend if they need Scrum in the certain moment or not. But for the people who just started and would like to become a Scrum Master, is it really it's better to go to the big company that they have many multiple teams, they have the place for the knowledge sharing with other Scrum Masters, or it's better to go to the small companies like startups and so on to really get in touch with that final product to the customer.
That's a really good question. And I'm not sure that I have the answer because I'm actually still with the first company I started with. And it's a big company, but at the same time, it's a company that doesn't have at the company level, it doesn't have a strong agile adoption. So I'm kind of in between the two, right? I work for a larger corporation, but I'm very, very focused on my team because there's not too much that's agile outside of it, right? Uh, and I think that has been really good. I'm not sure if this leans toward it's better to work for a large corporation or a small team. Um, but I would probably lean towards small team. I think it says more about that because that's where I've had a lot of success and really fulfilling moments with my team. Um, and furthermore, like the one thing that has helped me a lot here in sort of leveling up as a Scrum Master myself is that because we don't have a larger Agile adoption, we largely stick to pure Scrum. And I see a lot of new or aspiring Scrum Masters getting their Scrum certification, but then also taking classes on SAFe or learning about Nexus or Scrum at Scale or the Spotify model. And all those things are interesting, but they all make little tweaks to Scrum, or they sort of, it feels like they push them into sort of a mold where Scrum is a little bit different once you're scaling it. So I think if you could start with a team and learn Scrum in its purest form first, then you would know what parts are, you know, better to leave well enough alone, and which ones are safe to amend, and all that without sacrificing a lot of agility in order to scale them.
At the end of the day, it's good to have the experience from big company where you see multiple teams working together. They're using some scaling methods, and also to have that experience from the startups where you have that bigger impact. I would say I'm not saying that you cannot have the impact in a big company, but it might be harder to have that impact, I would say. So what is the biggest problem, in your opinion, for the Scrum Masters?
The biggest problem for the Scrum Masters, in what way?
Anyway, professional way. I mean, maybe I should ask what is your main struggle. Maybe I shouldn't use the word problem for that, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that my main struggle as a Scrum Master has been that despite Scrum being the most popular Agile framework, and despite agility being almost a given in software development companies now, there's not a super strong understanding or acceptance of it necessarily. We have people who are, interspersed among all the teams, those that are agile and those that are not, that have their own personal individual history that guides them to either be very accepting of Scrum or not at all accepting of Scrum. And when somebody says, oh, I've worked for 20 years in waterfall, or I can be agile without doing it the way that this team's doing it, or worst of all is Scrum doesn't work because it didn't work for me at my last job. Those are like giant hurdles as a Scrum Master to try and get over, because you have to avoid an adversarial relationship between a developer on your team who can have a lot of influence on how everyone else views agility, and yourself, who's trying not to cause any hard feelings, but also guide the team at the same time, even if you are directly contradicting something that someone on the team is saying. It's a really, really difficult balance to
So
strike.
I would ask, what is your approach for your development? Because my podcast is mainly about the personal development, so I also asking people what are their approach to the personal development, and especially as a Scrum Masters, we are maybe not designed, but we are supposed to develop ourselves on a daily basis.
my approach for personal development in terms of my career or
Yeah, career
my growth
and
as a
personal, as it's called, personal development.
yeah. Well, I talked a moment ago about the concerns I have about having to work for companies whose missions don't align with my own values perfectly. So, um, my plans over the next few years are to uh, try out working for different companies, looking for places where I can learn more about agility, try different scaling frameworks, et cetera, to grow as an agilist, and to be able to get more and more out of that. But then in the further out future, I would like to stop working with companies altogether, because unless I can find one that's really doing awesome things that line up perfectly for me, I find that working with individuals is a lot more fulfilling. So my personal or my career development is moving more in the direction of learn more while I'm with these companies to eventually be able to bring that to anybody who wants it without having to work for a company.
My question maybe was also related to the this whole, I mean, industry that we have right now about the training, certification, and so on. Yeah, and I'm just curious about your approach to that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any criteria when it comes to choosing the trainings, choosing the I don't know, webinars, and so on? Because books, okay, books are really, let's call it cheap sources of knowledge. But about the trainings, there are a bunch of them. They cost a lot in majority of the cases. And do you have any
Mm-hmm.
criteria of choosing the best one, which fits best to you?
To be perfectly honest, I am not a strong believer as an individual in guided training. I think that yeah, I'm not a big believer in it. I think that well, like I said before, I think that there's a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
a certification mill where it's more about marketing than about value, and that worries me. So I'm a natural skeptic when it comes to any kind of training program in Agile. Um, because of that, I only have one certification, and I don't intend to get any more unless an employer requires that I have it. And my personal method for upskilling is to be in the trenches, try to understand the problems that I have with my team or that my team is trying to solve, and use the incredible power of Google and apparently now also ChatGPT to find solutions that other Scrum Masters have used in similar situations. I still feel like that's probably the strongest way uh, to learn. It's always very customized to your own needs.
And I think this is connected to this what I heard recently from one of my colleague who is trying to who is trying to become a Scrum Master, and he because he worked previously in completely different area, and he said that um, the agile, let's call it, industry is the first one where so many people would like to share their knowledge and experience for free.
Hmm.
And I think that
Yeah,
power of
absolutely.
communities are really good. I mean, it's something that we should use, in my opinion.
Hmm. For sure. I know that you've seen this because this is how we know each other, but LinkedIn has been unbelievably valuable for me as an agilist. Just the sheer number of conversations that I see in the agile community every day that are just all over the range of Scrum, Kanban, XP, all these different things that we can be working in, and all of these minds contributing to the conversation. It's amazing. My favorite ones, though, the ones that I feel are the most useful, are when you see the newest agilists asking questions or posing their own thoughts And then you have a lot of more experienced agilists that show up in those threads and either give them kudos for a great idea or sometimes correct misinformation, which is super strong. I think that the community is really doing a great job of being sort of self-managing and growing its own knowledge base.
Yeah, that's totally right. And I think that asking the questions and, trying to get the answers from other people from this agile environment is really a great tool. But actually, the title of the podcast of this episode will be about how to Scrumify your life. And actually, this is the title that is really visible on your LinkedIn profile. So you already talk about that approach to use the Scrum not only in the actually agile methods as well, not only in the let's call it as a IT environment, but maybe you would like to explain it more. How these terms get into your life, and what does it mean? Also connected with the book that you have on Amazon.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning it. It's so Scrumify is just sort of a word that I made up in some of my earliest contributions to LinkedIn when I was talking about how you can use Scrum in contextual ways in your own life that don't have to be work related. For instance, I had a post saying, here's how you could Scrumify your job search, since most people on LinkedIn were looking for work and posting about that. I said, hey, I use Scrum every day for work. Here's how you can take this same structure and these same principles and apply it to a job search so that you're acting in a deliberate way, you're not overcommitting, you're not risking burnout, you're raising quality of your applications and your resume and your interview question responses to try and have a better outcome. So it was actually after I made a couple posts like that someone told me they really liked my brand of Scrumify Your Life, which I didn't realize that I had, but I leaned into it then. And over the last, I guess it took me like 3 or 4 months to put it together, but I essentially took a bunch of lessons from Scrum, Kanban, XP, Agile in general, and compiled them into about a 40-ish page document that strips the jargon out and simplifies things to translate agility as a framework for individuals to do work that is not necessarily workplace related. I released, the book is on Amazon. So if you want a copy, you can pick it up there, but you don't have to because it's also completely free. And you can just, I'm sure if you search for it, you'll find it. If you connect with me on LinkedIn, then I'll send you a copy.
Yeah, I put the link also in the description. So if anyone will be interested, yeah, you can just look at that link. And so you mentioned about this using the Scrum in your life apart from the work, but what about the other fields? What about the other area or industries where, in your opinion, Scrum can be used as well?
Well, that's a good question. I think that Scrum is suitable for any kind of complex work, right? All that's important is that you know where you are and you know where you want to be, but you don't know the steps, right? And this is probably something that every agile practitioner already understands, but if you're new to this, it's basically the difference between when you use all your planning up front and then your execution, which we call waterfall, and when you do a little bit at a time. If you know all the steps and there's low uncertainty, then you don't need agility. You just plan the work and then do the work, and it's really easy. Like creating a widget in a factory. You make the same widget 1,000 times, they will all be exactly the same. So you don't really need to iterate. But when you're making something that you've never made before or planning to do something you've never done before and you don't know how to do it, you just start with what you know, do a little bit, and then more and more things will clear up. So medicine, construction, like Construction is a really good
They used
area to talk about,
Scrum
right?
even before it was known by others, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. It's R&D, right?
Yes.
Every product that you have ever seen, any physical product, let's say a house, right? I'm sure somewhere in the city where you live, there's a house, and right next to it is the exact same house. And you're like, okay, so we can build the same house twice, right? On the second house, they didn't have to use agility because there was no new research, there was no new development. They knew how to make that house because they'd already made it once, right? But the first house you have to be agile for. The first building that you make, you have to iterate. You have to, unfuzzy everything around you a little bit at a time as you learn.
Yeah, but on the other hand, for example, in case of the building when I'm living in, they had some unexpected situation and they had to adapt to that, and they changed some plans. I know how it's called professionally, but yeah, I think, in my opinion, in that construction industry, Scrum was known long time before it was invented, in my opinion.
Yeah, in every industry, like everything that we've ever made that wasn't made before, or anytime we've ever had to adjust for a changing situation, we had to be agile. This is actually like the whole point of Scrumify Your Life, is that everyone is already agile. We're agile every day, and we just don't think of it that way. So many of us are just not at all exposed to the idea of agility, so we don't think of it. But once you know that you're agile and you start learning about the different things that agile teams and agile practitioners do to lean into it, then you can lean into it too to become a lot more effective.
And as the last part of every podcast that I'm recording with the guests, there is a place for the auto promotion. So if you would, if you would like to, you can tell how you can help others and where people can find you.
Sure, thanks. I don't think I need a lot more promotion. You're already trying to promote my book, so thanks. But anyone who would like to is more than welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. And the way that I help others right now is mostly by giving away free coaching and mentoring sessions. So if you have an interest in Scrum or agility, you're trying to do something big in your life and you're not sure how to do it, feel free to set up a call with me. You can, if you connect with me on LinkedIn, I'll send you the link, and it's very easy. It's 100% free. The only catch that comes with it is after we've had our call, I send you an email later asking if you're in a place where you can financially donate, and you're not paying for your own calls, but I'm looking for people to sponsor going into the future so that I can continue to give away free calls to whoever needs them, and only those people who are in a good financial place would be paying for them. That way it's never a burden on anybody. My ultimate goal is to have more and more time that I spend talking and helping people in India, South America, Africa, places that just can't afford Western European and American pricing, but getting the Americans to pay for it.
Yeah, that's a really good mission. Good to hear that.
Thanks.
So I would like to thank you for our conversation. I hope that it will be useful for many people. Yeah, so let's stay in touch and see you next time.
Thank you so much, David.